Hello guys, my name is Nash. Welcome to Thursday Tales of Terror. TTT. So for today's case, I was reading up on this case story, and this case is definitely one of the most brutal I've read so far. So just a disclaimer, it will have a lot of graphic descriptions, however I will not include any graphic images. So I mean, when it comes to torture, I thought there was nothing that was going to be more brutal than the Hello Kitty murder that happened in Hong Kong that I previously covered, but apparently this case proves me wrong. This case is spine-chilling and it makes me very angry. It's an extremely sad case that involved the 17-year-old Japanese girl named Junko Furuta in the late 1980s. She was kidnapped, raped, and tortured in unimaginable ways for a period of time and eventually killed in an extremely brutal way by 4 teenage boys. Her murder case was called the concrete-encased high school girl murder case due to her body being discovered in a concrete drum. As always, I like to talk about the victim first, so just a little background on Junko Furuta. Junko Furuta was born on 18 January 1971 in Misato, Saitama Prefecture in Japan. She lived with her parents, her older brother, and her younger brother. She attended Yashio Minami High School and she also had a part-time job working at the plastic molding factory. She wanted to earn some money for a graduation trip that she had planned. Now, Junko Furuta was very well liked by her classmates. She was a very cheerful and studious girl. She was very well behaved too. Usually, kids at this age would experiment a little by learning how to drink or smoke or do drugs and party, but Junko Furuta was not interested in any of those. She was a good student with good grades and good attendance. She looked forward to continuing her education and attending college. She even accepted a job at an electronics retailer where she planned on working after graduation. Junko Furuta was also a very beautiful and attractive girl, and this likely contributed to her popularity. So there was this boy, Hiroshi Miyano. He saw Junko Furuta and he developed a crush on her. He went to ask her out and she rejected him. Now, this rejection really affected him badly. Why? He was a boy that was known to be affiliated with the Yakuza. If you don't know what the Yakuza is, they are like gangsters. They are a very powerful criminal organization in Japan. So he always gets what he wants because of his affiliation with them. So in fact, he had never faced rejection before, and Junko Furuta turning him down made him furious. It kind of hurt his ego and reputation, so that's when he decided to seek revenge. In fact, Hiroshi Miyano was a very problematic boy to begin with. He had a history of problematic behavior since elementary high school. He shoplifted, he damaged school property and others. In April 1986, he enrolled in a private high school in Tokyo, but he dropped out the following year. After this, he continued to commit several crimes that escalated over time. So on the 25th of November 1988, Hiroshi Miyano and his friend Nobuharu Minato was wandering around the Misato area with the intention of robbing and raping local women. While in the area at around 8:30 p.m, they spotted Junko Furuta. Junko Furuta was on her bike on the way home after she ended her shift at her part-time job. And Hiroshi Miyano came up with a plan. He ordered Minato to attack her and knock her off of her bike while he would pretend to come to her rescue. So Minato did just that. He attacked her and he knocked Junko Furuta off of her bike and fled the scene. And coincidentally, Hiroshi Miyano hurriedly went over to help her, and he also offered to walk her home. At that time, Junko Furuta didn't suspect anything and she accepted the offer, thinking nothing much of it and that he was just being genuine. After all, it was better than being attacked again. While walking her home, Hiroshi Miyano somehow managed to lead her to a warehouse nearby where he revealed his Yakuza connections to her. And in that warehouse, he raped her repeatedly. He then took her to a hotel that was located nearby as well. In the hotel, he called his friends, his accomplice Nobuharu Minato, and his 2 other friends, Joe Ogura and Yasushi Watanabe. He started bragging to them about the rape. Joe Ogura reportedly asked Hiroshi Miyano to keep her so they all could have a turn. From then on, he and his friends took turns assaulting her. Unfortunately, this was nothing new to them. The group actually had a history of gang rape and had recently kidnapped and raped another girl whom they released afterward. Now, instead of releasing Junko Furuta, at around 3 a.m., Hiroshi Miyano took her to a nearby park where Minato, Ogura, and Watanabe were waiting. They had gotten hold of a home address by ransacking through her backpack, and inside the backpack they found a notebook which had her address written on it. So they told Junko Furuta that they know where she lived, and if she ever attempted to escape or try anything funny, the Yakuza members would kill her family. There was nothing she could do as the four boys overpowered her easily. They took her to a house in Ayase district of Adachi owned by Minato's parents and gang raped her. That house soon became their regular gang hangout. On the 27th of November 1988, Junko Furuta's parents alerted the police about their daughter's disappearance. In order to prevent the police from conducting further investigations, the boys forced Junko Furuta to call her mother and say that she had run away from home but was safe and was staying with some friends. They also forced Junko Furuta to ask her mother to stop the police investigations. Now, when Minato's parents were around, Junko Furuta was forced to pose as one of the boys' girlfriend. It didn't take Minato's parents long to realize that something was not right. When her wounds and discomfort became noticeable, Minato's parents realized that she was not who they thought she was. The boys eventually stopped pretending when it's clear that Minato's parents won't report them to the police. According to Minato's parents, they were afraid to get involved because they were aware of Hiroshi Miyano's connections to the Yakuza. They were also unable to control their own son. In fact, Nobuharu Minato was very violent towards his own parents. Minato's brother, on the other hand, was also aware of the situation, but unfortunately he did nothing to stop it from happening. I'm just really surprised that the Minato family didn't get charged or anything, because the fact that the torture and murder did take place in their home. I mean, if they were aware of what's going on but they did not chase them away or alert the authorities, so isn't this like aiding them in the murder as well? It's so disappointing. Anyway, the group held Junko Furuta captive in the Minato's residence where they repeatedly beat, raped, and tortured her. Junko Furuta was raped multiple times every single day. They also invited some friends over and Yakuza members to torment Junko Furuta. In the first few days, at least 30 of them raped her, and at least 100 people knew of what's happening to her. It was said that even women were invited to come have a look, like she's some kind of exhibition. According to trial statements, the boys raped her over 400 times, beat the shit out of her, starved her, hung her from the ceiling, and used her as a punching bag. The four even shaved her pubic hair and forced her to dance to music while naked and masturbate in front of them. They even left her outside in the balcony in the middle of the night with little clothing. And if I'm not wrong, December should be the winter month or nearing winter, so she was practically left outside to freeze. They also urinated on her and would force her to eat cockroaches and drink urine, her own urine too. They would beat her with all sorts of things like golf clubs, iron rods, and even stored her in the refrigerator for hours. They inserted all kinds of objects into her vagina and anus, including a hot exploding light bulb, fireworks, a metal rod, a bottle, grilled chicken skewers, and scissors. They burned her vagina and clitoris and eyelids with cigarettes, lighters, and candle wax. They would drop dumbbells on her stomach, crushing it. One of her nipples were even twisted with pliers. They also made a number of holes in her body with needles. She was also forced to smoke multiple cigarettes at once and inhale pain thinner. After around 20 days of her abduction and torture, Junko Furuta somehow managed to call the police. However, she was caught by the boys, who disconnected the call by snatching away the phone from her before she could even say anything to the police. Following this, she was punished severely. They poured lighter fuels on her legs and burnt them with fire. She could not even walk after this. She also had difficulty gripping onto anything as her hands had been smashed with dumbbells to the point where her bones were crushed and her fingernails shattered. They also pushed a large bottle into her anus, causing severe bleeding, and she went into convulsions. The boys thought that she was faking it, and so they set her on fire again. Miraculously, she survived these injuries and continued to be raped and brutally tortured. On multiple occasions, Junko Furuta actually had begged her captors to just kill her and get it over with, but they refused. Having so many injuries all over her body, Junko Furuta could not even stand due to pain. She had to crawl downstairs to use the bathroom, and it took her very long. She eventually lost bladder and bowel control, and they beat her for soiling the carpets. She could not breathe because of a blood clot in her nose, and her eardrums also got damaged. She had internal bleeding, and as such she could not even digest the food, which led her to vomit, and she was also beaten up for this. Eventually, Junko Furuta even stopped urinating after around 30 days. By the end of December, Junko Furuta was also becoming severely malnourished after being fed only small amounts of food and eventually just milk. Junko Furuta's appearance was drastically changed from the brutality of the attacks. Her face was so swollen that it was difficult to make out her features. Her body was also severely crippled, giving off a rotting smell, and that caused the 4 boys to lose their sexual interest in her. As a result, the boys kidnapped and gang raped the 19-year-old woman who, like Junko Furuta, was on her way home from work, but they let her go after gang raping her. On the 4th of January 1989, after losing a game of mahjong, Hiroshi Miyano decided to vent his anger towards Junko Furuta. In their anger, the boys beat her with an iron barbell and kicked and punched her. They continued to punch her, ignited the candle and dripped hot wax on her face, placed 2 short candles on her eyelids and forced her to drink her own urine. They made her stand and struck her feet with a swinging stick. She fell onto a stereo and collapsed in a fit of convulsion. Since pus was emerging from her infected burns, the 4 boys covered their hands in plastic bags. They continued to beat her and drop an iron exercise ball onto her stomach several times. They poured lighter fluid onto her thighs, arms, face and stomach and set her on fire once again. Junko Furuta allegedly made attempts to put out the fire, but gradually she became unresponsive. The attack reportedly lasted 2 hours. Junko Furuta eventually succumbed to her wounds and died. Now, less than 24 hours after her death, Nobuharu Minato's brother called to tell him that Junko Furuta appeared to be dead. Afraid of being penalized for murder, the group wrapped her body in blankets and shoved her into a travel bag. They then put her body in a 55 US gallon drum and filled it with wet concrete. At around 8 p.m, they loaded it and eventually disposed the drum into a cement truck in Koto, Tokyo, and they thought they could get away with it. On 23 January 1989, Hiroshi Miyano and Joe Ogura were arrested for the gang rape of the 19-year-old girl whom they had kidnapped in December. On 29 March 1989, 2 police officers came to interrogate them as women's underwear had been found at their addresses. During the interrogation, Hiroshi Miyano got confused. He somehow thought that the police were interrogating him on Junko Furuta, but instead the police were questioning him on another woman's disappearance. They had been referring to the murder of a different woman and her 7-year-old son that had occurred 9 days prior to Junko Furuta's abduction, a case which remains unsolved. So, thinking that Joe Ogura had already confessed to the crime, Hiroshi Miyano told the police where to find Junko Furuta's body. The police were of course puzzled by this sudden confession, but they set off to look for the body and found the drum containing Junko Furuta's body the following day. She was identified via fingerprints. Now, Junko Furuta was also found to be pregnant despite the severe damage to her uterus. Some of the kidnappers' friends had been officially identified, including Tetsuo Nakamura and Koichi Ihara. They were charged with rape after their DNA was found on and in the victim's body. It was said that Koichi Ihara was allegedly bullied into raping Junko Furuta, and after leaving the Minato's household, he told his brother what happened. His brother subsequently told their parents, who then alerted the police. 2 police officers actually went down to the Minato's household, but they were told that there was no girl inside. The police officers declined an invitation to look into the house, believing that the invitation alone was sufficient proof that there was indeed no girl in the house. They should have just gone in and checked. If they had gone in and checked, Junko Furuta's ordeal would have only lasted 16 days and she would still be alive. The 2 police officers were eventually fired from their job, as they should. On 1st April 1989, Joe Ogura was arrested for a separate sexual assault and subsequently re-arrested for Junko Furuta's murder. The arrest of Yasushi Watanabe, Nobuharu Minato and his brother followed. The identities of the boys were initially sealed by the court as they were all juveniles at the time of the crime. They were respectively referred to as A, B, C and D in court documents. However, journalists from the Shukan Bunshin, I don't know how to pronounce that, discovered uncovered their identities and published their names. They stated that given the severity of the crimes, the accused did not deserve to remain anonymous. Kudos to the journalists for that. All 4 boys then pled guilty to committing bodily injury that resulted in death rather than murder. In July 1990, a lower court sentenced Hiroshi Miyano, the alleged leader of the crime, to 17 years in prison. He appealed his sentence, but Tokyo High Court Judge Ryuji Yanase sentenced him to an additional 3 years in prison instead. The 20-year sentence is in fact the second longest sentence given in Japan before life imprisonment. He was 18 at the time of the murder. And by the orders of the civil court, Hiroshi Miyano's mother reportedly paid 50 million yen, which was equivalent to US 425,000 at the time, in compensation to Junko Furuta's parents after selling their family home. Hiroshi Miyano was denied parole in 2004 and in January 2013 was rearrested for fraud. Due to insufficient evidence, he was released without charge later that month, so he is a free man. Nobuharu Minato, on the other hand, who originally received a 4 to 6 year sentence, was resentenced to 5 to 9 years by the same judge upon appeal. He was 16 at the time of the murder. Nobuharu Minato's parents and brother, however, were not charged, and this made Junko Furuta's parents really upset. They filed a civil lawsuit against Nobuharu Minato's parents, in whose homes the crimes were committed, and they won the lawsuit. After his release, Nobuharu Minato moved in with his mother, and he wasn't able to get a job since. In 2018, Nobuharu Minato was arrested again for attempted murder after beating a 32-year-old man with a metal rod and slashing his throat with a knife. Yasushi Watanabe, who was originally sentenced to 3 to 4 years in prison, received an upgraded sentence of 5 to 7 years. He was 17 at the time of the murder, and after he was released, he managed to find love and married a Romanian woman. How even? Joe Ogura, on the other hand, served 8 years in a juvenile prison before he was released in August 1999. He was 17 at the time of the murder. And after his release, he took the family name Kamisaku when he was adopted by a supporter of his. Why would he even have supporters? It's just disgusting. He is said to have boasted about his role in the kidnapping, rape and torture of Junko Furuta. In July 2004, he was arrested for assaulting Takatoshi Isono, an acquaintance he thought his girlfriend may have been involved with. Joe Ogura tracked Isono down, beat him and shoved him into his truck. He then drove Isono from Adachi to his mother's bar in Misato, where he allegedly beat Isono for 4 hours. During that time, Joe Ogura repeatedly threatened to kill the man, telling him that he had killed before and knew how to get away with it. He was sentenced to 7 years in prison for assaulting Isono and has since been released. Now this part really infuriated me. Joe Ogura's mother allegedly vandalized Junko Furuta's grave, stating that she had ruined her son's life. It has also been reported that Joe Ogura has depleted his father's savings. The savings was intended to be provided as restitution to Junko Furuta's family, but instead were used on buying and consuming a number of luxury goods. Many believe that the sentences were too light for the severity of the crimes committed, including myself. It's so inhumane what they did. What they put an innocent girl through was just horrific. They deserve to go through the same thing. And all 4 boys were protected by special provisions applied to individuals 18 years and below. During the sentencing, the judge commented that exceptionally grave and atrocious violence had been inflicted upon the victim, and that Junko Furuta had been murdered so brutally at the young age of 17 that her soul must be wandering and torment. A spectator in the gallery was reported to have fainted upon hearing the brutality and the details of the torture. Junko Furuta's mother also reportedly had a severe mental breakdown which required psychiatric treatment. Junko Furuta's funeral was held on 2nd April 1989. One of her friends' memorial address stated, "Jun-chan, welcome back. I have never imagined that we would see you again in this way. You must have been in so much pain, so much suffering. The happy we all made for the school festival really looked good on you. We will never forget you. I have heard that the principal has presented you with a graduation certificate. So we graduated together, all of us. Jun-chan, there is no more pain, no more suffering. Please rest in peace." Junko Furuta's intended future employer presented her parents with the uniform she would have worn in the position she had accepted. The uniform was placed in her casket. At her graduation, as mentioned by one of her classmates, Junko Furuta's school principal presented her the high school diploma, which was given to her parents. The location near where her body was discovered has been developed since and is now known as Wakasu Park. At least 3 books have been written about the crime. The case was also the inspiration for the film Concrete in 2004 and the manga 17 Sai. So there we have it. Today's story is just, I know many people were very affected by this story, even myself. It was difficult doing this story, reading up on it. I had to take breaks and eventually I got so angry at some parts while reading it. It's clear that the boys never repented and they continued committing crimes. They lived on with their lives, and to me, the people who knew of the participation deserved to get punished too. When you know that something bad is happening and you don't do anything, in a way you're part of the murder. You're just as horrible. And what angers me the most is Nobuharu Minato's family. How could they even let such a thing happen in their home? And the fact that Joe Ogura's mother took the time to even vandalize Junko Furuta's grave is just, what kind of a mindset do you have? Even after the poor girl's passing, you don't leave her alone. Why didn't it occur to her that her precious son took someone else's life and that he tortured her to the point that it's worse than being in hell? I do believe that amongst family members, they should have a secret code word for help. So when children call, they can mention that word as a sign of distress. But this whole incident also shows how strong and brave Junko Furuta was. The fact that she survived for so long through all that crazy and brutal torture, she was really, truly a fighter. I don't even know how to end today's video, but I upload videos every Thursday. If you like my content and the way I tell stories, please do give me a like and subscribe to my channel. I'll see you next Thursday with another story, hopefully not so much of a brutal and tragic one. Bye!